What's going on, guys? The NBA betting market video for December 29th. We're going to start off with the Bulls Wizards. There's 1,021 bets so far on this game. Wizards opened up at -6.5. They've been bet down to -6, despite receiving 66% of the bets, but they have only received 51% of the money, fat guy.
Well, that's the interesting spot. I mean, usually we handicap NFL. We don't handicap. We make market plays on NFL games, and generally this is an indicator. Only 34% of bettors are taking the Bulls, but yet they're putting up half the money. What does that tell you? There's probably some sharp money on the Bulls, I would imagine, considering that since 34% is realistically they're betting, one third is betting the same as a half. One third is betting the same amount as two thirds, right? So they're making up half the money. So that means there's more dollars per person on the Bulls. And I would imagine that there's still probably meat on the bone because usually you see this move, but then the line has already moved and then there's no value left. But it opened at 6.5. It's now 6, but the juice is only -101. So what does that mean? You lose that half point that the Bulls would get, but the juice is at a -101, which is pretty much even money. You have to wager $1.01 to profit $1, whereas usually you have to wager $1.05 to profit $1. I understand this is confusing. We're gonna learn it. It's gonna get hammered through your heads, and -101 is really good juice. So I would imagine there's still probably value there, considering that the line has moved, but the juice has been comparable, right? Because 6 at good juice is actually probably the same as 6.5 at regular juice, I would imagine. We don't have NBA key numbers. We're compiling it all now, and we'll have a better idea by the end of the season. And how? And here's a good question you're going to ask yourself: how is there value like this available? Like what does the book do? Don't they know that if there's value on the Bulls? I'll tell you what, the book doesn't care. Look at the money percentage, 59, 49, 51. They're going to their commission's there. It follows in that line, right? All they care about for the most part, is balancing the book because they charge a five one oh
Commission.
fifths commission or 1/11th commission sometimes. So they're gonna get paid either way. It doesn't matter who wins the game, who covers. They're covered. So if you win, whatever, it makes no difference to them. Now the money line, which I find interesting, is probably there's no when it says 100% money. That's because we don't actually have a figure to put in. And my guess is though is that the money percentage is comparable to the odds. I would imagine that there's a few more bucks on the Wizards despite less people betting them. But also too, 66% of the money line isn't exactly a Joe market as much. It's more of a I feel like it's a bit sharper of a market because the you can get value where if you make a graphing chart like we have in the NFL, where you can line up spreads to money line and you can figure out exactly what it should be. And sometimes you often get better value just taking them to win. The one drawback is it's higher variance because it's way more likely that the Bulls cover a 6 or 6.5 spread than they do winning the game outright, right? So even though it might be a better expected value play over the long run, you're going to run into variance where sometimes they'll lose 10 in a row, sometimes they'll win 3 in a row. And but the thing is, we're doing this from a volume perspective. Whenever you do sports betting, it's never one game, it's never one decision. It's a basket of decisions, and you have to make strong ones over a really long period of time to see the fruits of those labors. And bankroll management. Anyways, it's just a market video, but there's a lot of stuff to encompass in all of these assessments of the numbers. And what do we got left? Got the over/under on this game?
Yeah, the OU. So it opened at 233. It's been bet up to 238. 60% of bettors are on the over, and 93% of the dollars wagered is on the over, pushing that line up 5 points.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So the book is trying to incentivize you to take the under, right? Why would they change the price? I know there are irregularities, and those are usually really good betting spots when there are, but this follows the standard flow, right? Because there's money just kept flowing in on the over. So obviously pros and Joes alike, considering the amount of money is more per person for the volume. So because 60% is making up 93% of the money. So that means there are more than likely pros or perhaps a whale. I doubt it. This is more of a pro thing. Usually pros like under though. And there's also Joes that also like the over. Joes tend to like overs as well because they like rooting for high score. You have to be a really cynical person to bet on unders Not that we aren't, but that's usually how it is. So I would imagine that they're trying to get people to bet the under to balance their book because they don't want to take exposure. So this is the fun part about markets is at 233 there was probably a lot of value on the over, but if this continues to trend upwards, there's going to be perhaps even value on the under, just so the book can get balanced. But however, the book can also get middled, so they might also what that means is if a ton of money comes in at say 239, 240, and the total lands on 235. Well, that's in between 233 and 240. The book's going to lose both, so they have to be really careful as well. So there might be some juice implications. There's all sorts of things they're going to have to do, but that at the end of the day, sometimes the book does put out bum lines, and this just might be one of them. But it is a little bit early to make that assumption, especially because we're learning this NBA market as well. It's not identical to all other sports market, although they are pretty close.
And next up, we have Warriors Pistons. There's been 643 bets so far. Warriors opened at 3.5-point favorites on the road. They've been bet up to 4.5 with 65% of bets and 99% of the money.
Well, it's probably not that. Like when we see disparity that big, it's probably not quite as reported, but it is 65% of the people. So I would imagine which encompasses pros and Joes. And it moved 1 point from 3.5 to 4.5, but the juice came down a little bit. So it's not a lateral move completely. You know what I mean? Like it is a movement, but not a lateral one. And like I'd mentioned before in the last over-under video, maybe we missed the boat on the Warriors, maybe not. But perhaps that there would be some value on the Pistons if it does increase. You got to remember, it's a number, right? Like think of it this way. Oh, I like this team. I like that team. Would you lay Warriors minus 40? No. Would you take Pistons plus 40? Yes. So you have to figure out, you take the most extremes and then you break it down to where it really should be. And where do you find value on each team, right? And when you can't find value on either teams, that's where your number is. Like I said, we're betting numbers. We're not really betting teams. And it looks like, I would imagine that with all of this money, they probably want to balance on the Pistons. So it is interesting. But however, though, this is the contrary. They do accept bets on both sides. So there is a possibility that the Pistons do have a lot of money on the money line. It doesn't look that way, though, considering that 85% of people are also betting the Warriors on the money line. I think this is even more indicative. Minus 157 to minus 177 seems like a bigger jump than minus 3.5 at minus 105 to minus 4.5 minus 103. So they might be finding their legs as well, because don't forget, this might have some anomalies considering virus implications and stuff like that, because this is a little bit interesting to me too. And literally everyone's betting the Warriors here in more than likely that all the money is on the Warriors as well. So
the other thing that I'm going to jump in and say is that since everybody is on the Warriors, both against the spread and the money line, and the line hasn't moved drastically, it kind of makes us like the Pistons, but we're not here to give picks. We're here to just report on the market. So the market is saying everybody is on the Warriors. So let's head over to the OU of this game, which opened at 223. It's been bet up to 226. 77% of bettors are on the over. 97% of the money is on the over for this game. So public like the Warriors, and they like the over.
So going back to what Big Rise said, is usually that would make us like the Pistons. However, though, this might not be a ton of exposure because, look, there's only 643 bets, and that's across all markets. So maybe this isn't really like it's exposure, but it's not massive exposure, right? It's not like an NFL game. If you saw this in an NFL game, someone's getting fired. I'm telling you that right now, because usually there's something like 30,000 bets, or at least 15,000. And that's usually for more money as well. So that would equal huge exposure. Perhaps on this particular basketball game, there isn't as much money, so they can take a little bit more risks, perhaps prodding the market. And as he said, most people are taking the over, and most of the money is on the over, and it shifted 223 to 226. So I'm wondering if some of these books are going to get middled by the end of this, because we're going to have to compare this this morning line to the closing one, and we're going to be able to know exactly what happened and whether they profited or not. And that'll be an interesting metric going forward, especially at the season's close.
Next up, we have Celtics Pacers. There's been 1,399 bets so far. Celtics opened as 1-point favorites, but the line has moved to Pacers minus 1.5, despite them receiving 30% of bets and 36% of the money. As well as we have very similar numbers on the money line as well, Fat Guy. Pacers opened minus 106 on the money line. They've been bet up to minus 110 with only 31% of bets.
There is something interesting, though. So the Celtics were 1-point favorites. Now they're 1.5-point dogs, but they were 1-point favorites at even money, and they're 1.5-point dogs at minus 111. I don't have the conversion charts for NBA. We're still learning our way in this market. NFL, I could tell you the number, but that might be a lateral move, Big Rye. It might be. It might be a confusing one almost too. It's minus 111 juice isn't typically a number a pro will pay, so it's almost like they're incentivizing betting the Pacers. This is a really interesting one, actually. Like, why even move it at all, right? Because they're just changing. It's like they're just creating higher variance, I guess. I mean, it is interesting, right? Like, and it technically, this could be a reverse line movement as well. I mean, the juice does kind of cut it down a bit, but it could technically be a reverse line movement. That's where you have overwhelming demand for a product, and then you lower the price. It doesn't make sense. That's usually why we like the other side. So the Pacers, I'm going to say, are so far the most interesting prospect of these first three games, just from a market perspective. The money line too, but see, this is where it to me it seems like a lateral move, because the money line only moved from minus 104 to even money. So that's really negligible, but it is something. So I am most curious at how the Pacers perform under these market constraints. So that's the one I'm going to watch for. It's not, like I said, we're not here to give gambling advice. We're here to explore the market so that we can perhaps capitalize on it in the future.
The over-under for this game is 221. It's been bet down to 219. 56% of bettors are on the under. 92% of money on the under. So that all makes sense, as it's pushing in the same direction since there are so many bets. In fact, let's move on to the Raptors-Sixers game. 794 bets so far. Sixers opened as 2-point favorites. They've been bet down half a point to minus 1.5. 55% of bettors are on the Sixers, and 99% of the money is on the Sixers, which is an interesting line move.
Well, here's the one thing I haven't exactly touched on necessarily. It's just because you have lopsided money doesn't mean that's going to move the line instantly. They probably have a threshold that would take to do it, and 99% of the money, if it's 99% of $1,000, that's not really anything. You know what I mean? So it sounds like it looks like a lot, but it might not be anything. And a good example of the total take from the game would be that it only caused to move half a point. I would really like if we could get the full take on at least one of these games, and we'd be able to extrapolate the whole thing. That would be very good information. If anyone works at a sports book, please hit us up. We will keep it confidentially, but that information would be very, very interesting. All of that being said, it is an early market. This is pretty standard fare, I would say. Nothing jumping off the page. Like I said, the Pacers are the most interesting to look at so far in these first four games. This is pretty chalk, it looks like. And again, very little movement in the OU. A little bit on the people more like. Sorry, I'll let you introduce the over under here, Big Rye.
Well, the OU opened 218. It's been bet up to 219. 60% of bettors are on the over. 66% of the money is on the over, pushing it up 1 point.
With a slight movement, and it's only 794 bets. This is nothing out of the ordinary, I wouldn't say.
And one thing we did gloss over was the money line for this game. It opened Raptors plus 112. It's been bet down to plus 104, and they have received 90% of the bets. So that might be why that spread moved, because there has been more bets put on the Raptors money line. So it's one of those Vegas middling opportunities where if the Sixers win by one, the books are going to do well on both sides. Let's move on to the Knicks-Cavs game. 567 bets so far. Cavaliers open at 3.5-point favorites, still currently minus 3.5. 86% of bettors are on the Cavs. Despite 86% of bets, that line really hasn't moved. It's only moved 1 point on the juice from Knicks minus 105 to Knicks minus 106.
I'm going to go back to my original point about even though there's 86% of the bets, we don't know the money percentage. That money that's not indicative, that 100 that's there. It is only 567 bets, so it's possible that there just isn't a lot. Like the whole take for the game is just pretty low, right? So it's not enough to actually move it. So there's not much interest in this market, I would imagine, and that does kind of make sense. Like as far as like prolific public teams currently, like I'm not talking about as past the LeBron-less Cavaliers and the New York Knicks as of late. I can't imagine that there's as much interest. And point in case, it has the lowest amount of bets probably for this entire morning. So even though that there's a lot of people betting on one side, that's not indicative that there's a lot of money because there is no movement. So it probably doesn't cross their threshold. There is a slight move here in the money line where Cavaliers have become less of a favorite. It looks like. And
minus 157 to minus 152. 72% of bets on the Cavs. And then the OU open at 218. It's been bet down to 216, despite 76% of bets being on the over. But like Fat Guy said, since there's only 567 bets on this game, there is no money percentage information. So we just have a few early sharps, it looks like, on the Cavs spread, Cavs money line, and the over.
More than likely.
Next up, the Bucks Heat. There's 907 bets in this game. The Bucks open as 4.5-point favorites. They've been bet up to minus 5.5. 50% of bettors on each side, but 78% of the money is on the Bucks. And then for money line, Bucks open minus 186. They've been bet up to minus 215. 51% of bettors are on the Buccaneers, but 95% of money for the money line has been put on the underdog Heat, anywhere from plus 166 to plus 190.
Well, you got to remember also that there could be one guy who bet a lot of money on the Heat, and that's just kind of balancing it. Like I said, there's only 907 bets on this game so far, so that is a very real possibility. Everything does look to be in trend here. Contrarian play, it could be the Heat. I mean, it's how you have to make kind of some sort of inferences, and it's possible that someone really likes the Heat, one guy, or maybe a couple, and they're putting up against all the Bucks. Bucks are, I would imagine, are a public team considering star power and recent success. Especially, I believe they had the best record in the regular season last year. Big Rye.
Yeah, but the Heat made the finals, so both of these teams are relatively public teams. This is going to be an entertaining game. It's probably going to end up with a lot of bets, but I have a feeling there's not going to be a lot of movement in the market other than what we've seen. The OU for this game is 223. It's been bet up to 226. 76% of bets have been put on the over, and 99% of the money is on the over. So I got a feeling a lot of public bettors probably think these are two very skilled, high-scoring teams. They've got money on the over, pushing it up.
Well, that might be an opportunity to wait until close and then bet the under, because there needs to be some buyback, and I would imagine that the under is going to provide that probably near close. So I would imagine a good number is probably somewhere in the 228 range, 229, if you are keeping an eye on that market.
Next up, we have Magic Thunder, 718 bets on this game. Magic opened as 5-point favorites. They've been bet up to minus 6.5.
And the interesting part about that is, okay, the juice did open at minus 5, minus 110, which is odd. Why wouldn't you do minus 4.5, minus 105? I'm still trying to figure out sometimes when they do it. You can do this for a really long time and still be a little befuddled. Like, why is that a number? Maybe there's a push frequency option as far as 5 goes for whatever reason. Maybe they're trying to get a middle themselves, or like a free roll middle. Anyways, all possible things, and it's up to minus 6.5, minus 105. I believe I would imagine this 98% of money has more weight than some of the other ones, considering they moved it 1.5. And look to further illustrate my point, is not all bet numbers are the same. Despite having only 718, this has moved 38 points. The money line minus 204 to minus 242. So that, I believe you, there's some serious dollars put because it'll cross the threshold for them because it's a little bit more action than the others because the line moves more drastic. So I bet you there is some heavy money that came on the Magic. It might have. I can tell you right now, it's more than likely probably like sealed, like stolen the value, because I can't imagine like the win probability between minus 242 and minus 204 is very large. So you probably are going to take a bum line at the Magic. So then you like once you've missed the boat on professional action and you weren't able to predict it, it's good to figure out, well, okay, how far is too far? Do you know what I mean? So how far, like, because then the Thunder become a consideration, right? Even though the early pros like Magic at minus 204, I doubt they would at minus 242. Like, you need such a higher win probability. So then now the Thunder become almost attractive at from one opening at plus 181 to plus 212. That is considerable movement. So I'm curious, like maybe Thunder at the death at closing line are probably going to be best. Magic might also get some public money as well. There's always that possibility.
Let's look at the over-under, Fat Guy. 218 is what it opened at. It's been bet up to 219. 67% of bets on the over. 83% of the money on the over. However, it's interesting to note the under at plus or at 219 points is a minus 114.
Yeah, that's not really a move to me. This sounds crazy. If anything, this is this feels like a move for the under, does it not?
Well, it's an indicator for us that if we were going to be betting this OU, we'd probably bet the under. It would kind of suck to get it at minus 114, but 67% of bettors, 83% of the money on the over should be pushing the line up. But however, the line was pushed up, but the books are worried about buyback at 219 if they've got the juice set at minus 114.
Absolutely. So again, this is okay. So first I said the Pacers are really interesting. This is even more interesting because it looks like you're moving the price. Oh, the over-under went from 218 to 219. But the win probability between minus 105 and minus 114 is going to be way more. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I'm conceding that. But I can just tell you right now from an experience perspective that the juice is making it a worse line movement. Minus 218 or 218, under 218, minus 105 is better than, like, I would imagine 2 to 3% better than under 219 at minus 114. So again, I'm just using some guerrilla math to quote rounders here, and that is very interesting. So all the money comes in and on the over, and then they do a phony under movement because this is deceiving. This is one of those things meant to trick the public, realistically, because they don't consider the
juice,
the ramifications of the juice and how massive it is. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's like taxes. It's like when they increase taxes, like, you know what I mean? The government, like 1 or 2% or something, and you're like, oh, it's nothing. But then you add it all up for everyone. It's just a ridiculous amount of money. This is the same thing. This really, really, really is. Think of juice as tax, and you're getting taxed for taking the under. So this is really weird to me. You get all the money on one side, and then you phony move the line. I don't know. This one smells. This one and the Pacers. This is why we do the market videos, because it's more interesting than anything. Is to think is people that are really in the know, what are they thinking and what are they doing? So I would earmark this under price as well.
And interesting note, because things change, guys. We've set this up, and it's been probably half an hour since we looked at it. But this line has come down to 218.5, but the under still has minus 112 juice on it. So it's still
that's
fishy,
not even a move, though. That's not even a move.
It's a slight move, though. It's interesting to see.
I don't know.
Next up, Pelican Suns. They have 945 bets so far. Suns opened as 3-point favorites at home. They've been bet down to minus 2.5. 58% of bettors and 98% of the money, however, is on the Suns, despite the line moving against them.
So here's a good example going as far as, like, not all total bets are the same. Because look at the Magic Thunder had 718, and it went from all the money was on the Magic, and it went from minus 204 to minus 242. That is a much larger jump than the Suns going from minus 146 to minus 137. And also, too, that's reverse line movement as well, though, on the
Pelicans, both on the spread and the money line, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
that is very interesting too. So I'm wondering, is there someone very good on the minority that likes the Pelicans? This is becoming an interesting one as well. However, though, there is a possibility that the early Suns money isn't substantial, and it's just Joe money, and they were just using it to gauge. There's a possibility they put this number out there to kind of gauge the market. And maybe early Joe bettors like the Suns, but not substantially. So,
well, I want to interject here because there is an important point that I have forgot to make a few times. But what's interesting with these early lines and the money percentages is usually games when they're put out right away, the maximum amount that you can bet on a game is lower than what you can get at tip off. So the books use it as a way to kind of test the market and see how well certain bettors have done. And that they can use that information to then set the market, make the limits a little bit higher, and then take the action on the side that they actually want to take more action on at that point. So it's always a little bit interesting to see, especially like some of the lower bet markets, like a Knicks Cavs game. Like it's interesting to see like with there's so little bets how it does affect all the different lines and all the different markets.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget, it's a lot easier to beat the earlier lines when you understand this stuff than it is beating the closing line. And that's why the closing lines allow such massive limits, right? Because it's hard. Like, even if you are beating it, you're beating it at a smaller percentage.
Well, even like yesterday's game, we had the behind the scenes guys. We ended up taking Memphis +4, and 2 minutes after we made the bet, the news came out that Durant was out, and the line ended up moving from Memphis +4 down to Memphis -1.5 at tip off. So it was a drastic movement, and it was something in the market that indicated to us that something was going on. It just so happened that the news came out.
That was the news
slightly after.
Did Memphis cover?
Yeah, Memphis. It went to overtime. They won by like 5 or 6, so it was a good result.
Nail biter, yeah.
Well, then let's take a look at the OU for this game. Pelican Suns. It opened 222. It's currently 222. 56% of bets on the under. However, 79% of the money is on the over. But books look pretty happy. The line is still at 222 from when it opened, and the juice hasn't changed as well. So it's interesting to note.
Yeah, it's probably that the amount of money bet on the OU currently is probably very small because it hasn't even dented. It hasn't affected at all.
Let's move. We got 2 more games to go. Timberwolves at Clippers. Clippers open at 10.5-point favorites. Still 10.5-point favorites with a small movement on the juice and 63% of bettors on the Clippers. Money line as well hasn't affected it much. It opened at a little bit higher juice on the Timberwolves side, and the juice has been bet down just a little bit from 441 down to 434. 54% of bettors on the Clippers money line, and 98% of the money is on this very, very large Clippers money line.
I don't think this is there's 983 bets, but I don't think there's a thwack more money on this game than anything, because look, they've barely moved anything. Even if you look across, here's a big difference. I keep referencing this. Magic Thunder going from 204 to 242. That it's 38 points of movement. That 38 points isn't the same if your starting point was 554. So that 10 point means even less. The 554 minus 554 to minus 544. Wow, that's a heavy favorite. I'm sorry. I'm learning as I go along, comparing spreads to money line percentages. That's even more than football would be. Very, very strange to me. The Timberwolves, they clearly don't have as much money, but it's not like I don't think there's a ton of money in the a ton of action on it necessarily. There might be 983 bets, but I don't think the money is as drastic as the Magic Thunder, for instance, considering perhaps a majority of the money is on the Clippers, but the movements have been so minimal.
And then for the OU, open 228 bet, and it's still 228. 28% of bets on the over, 72% of bets on the under. It just seems like a market that's going to mature quite a
Chalk,
bit when tip off comes. So not much else to say there. And then the last game of the night that we're going to cover, 605 bets on the Nuggets Kings. Nuggets open as 2.5-point favorites. They are still 2.5-point favorites despite the juice favoring the Kings at minus 111 at that same number. Bet percentage, 79% of bets are on the Nuggets, despite only 11% of the money being on the Nuggets at minus 2.5.
Yeah, this is interesting too, considering maybe they don't want to move the line because they don't want to get, they don't want to get middled, so they'll just adjust the commission a little bit. You know what I mean? There's a chance that there's someone put considerable money on the Kings, and this is.
Well, even the money line as well. They have 72% of bets, open 121, bet down to 116. Not a huge line movement there, but there is a lot of money on the Kings against the spread, and there's a lot of bets placed on the Kings money line, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's a little bit weird, but it's part of it too. Here is what makes me like the Kings. Kings money line as well, rather than pay the 111 juice. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do like perfect, in my head conversion math. Probably 116 is probably a more attractive price, I would imagine, just to win the game despite higher variance. But I mean, 89% of the money, 21%. This kind of reeks of a pro thing. Now I don't know the ilk of either team, but I would imagine the Kings are they unpopular? Is it fair to say that, Big Rye?
You know what? It's out of my realm because the Kings have been bad for so long that I'm not sure. They might have exciting rookies or really nice prospects coming up, or a team that's just gelling and playing well together. But you and I don't. We have no clue.
No, we don't. We don't. So, anyways, they look attractive. This might be my number 3 as far as points of interest. We're very interested in the under on the Magic Thunder, or the over-under, 218, 218.5, 219, and the Pacers. And then I'm going to say the Kings. I like the Kings' chances today. I got to be real.
Well, I do know that the Nuggets are like one of those teams that they're on the cusp of being a very, very public team. They have been good. They have good players. They have made runs in the playoffs over the last few years. So the Nuggets are definitely a more popular team than the Kings.
Comparatively, exactly right. Because that's the only thing is if you have a semi-public team against a team everyone hates, there's usually some value on the team that is swept under the rug. And considering like my limited knowledge of basketball, I haven't watched a basketball game forever, but it really doesn't matter when you're looking at these numbers. I would imagine that the Kings have a little bit of a black eye on them, which is always, you always like betting on those teams. It's usually better. So Kings here look interesting to me, at least. I'm not saying make a wager. I'm saying earmark it and have a look at it again. So what's the OU look like?
The OU is open at 224. It's been bet up to 226. 81% of bets and 93% of money is on the over. I will note that these two teams played actually on opening day, December 23rd, and the Sacramento Kings won by 2 points on the road. So
wow,
some impressive performances from the Kings, especially their bench players. They had 7 players scored 10 points or more in that game.
That's a good, yeah.
Whereas the Nuggets are going to be relying heavily on Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr., who is an up-and-coming star in the NBA. Anything else to add about this OU or this money line?
I think it's pretty standard fare. It got most of the money. They moved the line. I would imagine that there's a little bit more money on this OU than some of the other ones, considering there is movement. That 93% might be 93% of a little bit bigger of a pie than some of the ones, but this is pretty standard fare, I would say. Like I said, I am interested in seeing the Kings result after this evening.
All right, guys, thank you for watching the NBA betting market video for December 29th. Good luck in your December 29th wagers.